welcome to Bleach Revisited. I am Carker Gold, your host of this series in which we will be reading every single chapter of the Bleach manga, providing critical analysis of the art and the narrative, as well as personal response to each of these chapters. We'll also be discussing how the chapter connects to the rest of the manga as a whole. As usual, we begin these videos with a reading of the chapter that we are discussing for the episode. This is Chapter 106, Cause to Confront. Captain of the 8th Company. Yes. Pleased to meet you. Huh? Nano! Enough with the pedals! What? Do you hear me, Nano? Nano! That's enough! Oh, Nano! Sweet, sweet Nano! Lovely, precious Nano! Sorry, but I don't have time for your comedy routine. I'm just passing through. Aw, can't you play a little while longer? Sheesh, nobody's any fun nowadays. I'm in a hurry. Please, step aside. You don't seem like a bad guy. I don't want this to end in a fight. Oh, I don't want to fight either. But I can't let you pass. Might I convince you to retreat? I can't do that. I see. Then it can't be helped. Let's have a drink. Like friends. Huh? You know, if you won't retreat, then maybe you could just stay here. Don't worry. It'll all be over soon. The others are on the move even now. This unpleasantness will be soon finished. Until then, have a drink with me. The others? Ichigo. And the rest. Are they being attacked by the other captains? Uh-oh. I may have said too much. This changes things. Mr. Kyoraku, please move. Now. And if I say no? Then I'll move you. Uh-oh. Things are getting complicated. Bleach, Chapter 106, Cause to Confront. This is Shunsui, Kyoraku. Mist. 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 Missed me again. Why? How is he evading them? He deflected my first shot with one hand. He's evaded every shot I fired. It's not that they lack power, but they're not even grazing him. That other guy said he was an assistant adjutant. That's only 2 ranks below captain. Can 2 ranks make this much difference? Our captain's that much more powerful. Why don't you give it up? You understand now, don't you? Your firepower is certainly impressive. Your attacks are hard and fast, and their destructive force is quite high for a human. But they can't hit me. None of them can. It will always be the same. Why don't you give up and go home? Thanks for the advice, but I can't. Don't do it. You should know that there are two types of moves. Ones that cannot be performed at all once your limit has been reached, while the other can be performed beyond your limit at the cost of your life force. Your move is obviously the latter kind. And right now, you're way beyond your limit. Here's some friendly advice. Leave. If you keep this up, you'll die. Oh, my. Why do you insist on fighting? What is your purpose? Why did you come here? My purpose is to save Rukia Kuchiki. Rukia? She went missing in your world only this spring. You couldn't have known her very long. A thin friendship. Hard to believe it's worth risking your life for. You're right. I hardly know her. Maybe I wouldn't risk my life for her. But Ichigo wants to save her. Ichigo's putting his life on the line. That's reason enough for me to do the same. That's all the reason I need. Oh, well. Your resolve seems pretty strong. It would be disrespectful for me to try to talk you out of it. Alright then. I suppose I'll have to kill you. Ichigo! Can't we get in touch with them? What kind of teenagers don't have cell phones in this day and age? Neither one of them! Orihime's no good with machines, and Ryu's poor. Hariyama, you're a senior now. Maybe you should retire from the club and start studying for the college entrance exams. This is Takahara, a junior. And that is it for Bleach Chapter 106. That's that for that one. Not remembering the title of this one. As usual, folks. The title of it completely slips me. And it's a really simple title, too. Cause to Confront. You'd think I would remember that, but no. Let's get back to the beginning of this. Let's talk about this chapter, because I do like this chapter a good bit more than last one. Last one was actually one of the first chapters where I was like, yeah, it's just kind of a mid-chapter. It just kind of reestablishes some things. It does some things well and some things not so well. This chapter actually has a lot happening in it, so I'm much more drawn to this one. I'm much more excited to talk about this one, and hopefully you're excited to kind of get into it. So let us delve into the chapter. And first and foremost, we're taking a break from the Kenpachi fight that's been set up to do this fight with Sunsui Kyoraku. I always mess up. I'll say Sunsui. It's Shunsui Kyoraku. It's also easy to be like Kyoraku. Like to forget the O's in there. Shunsui Kyoraku. Yeah, it's easy to try to go through his name a little bit too fast. But Shunsui. It's Sui. Shunsui. Yeah, I'm gonna mess up a lot of the names in this. I'm sorry. I'm not a fluent Japanese speaker by any means. And I know, yes, names are names, but I am honestly much more familiar with the manga. I think people that are anime only are anime primary, probably going to be more critical about pronunciation. I only watched the anime in its entirety, and I haven't even watched it in its entirety. That's a lie. I have yet to go and actually watch a couple of the filler arcs near the end, and the the final arc. I need to actually go back and do that. 100% transparency here. I have not watched the animation for the very end of it. Or if I have, it has been way so long and I don't remember any of it. Because essentially my anime journey was like I followed it weekly because I started watching it as the anime started airing in Japan. I would watch the episodes online, and I was doing that all the way until I watched all the Bound arc. I did that until there's a number of filler arcs in the anime for those who are not aware. But I watched the entirety of the first filler arc, which was a really rough one. And then I got up to the Zanpakuto filler arc. And if you know the one, you know the one. That one was, I liked a good bit more. But I stopped watching around that time, around some of those filler arcs. And then I got back into it whenever it returned, and it concluded some of the later arcs, like the big conclusion that a lot of people were looking forward to. But then it continued, and it had some more things after that, and I did not watch it after that point. So kind of on and off, watched the anime, didn't watch all of it, and especially knowing that it didn't finish and culminate through the whole story, I was less interested in actually watching it because at that point I was just reading the manga weekly anyway, and I read the manga weekly all the way through the end. So yeah, I started reading the manga weekly pretty quickly, like around the time that I got to the Soul Society arc in the anime. I was reading the manga already. Like, I think I picked up the manga actually around these chapters. Like this is about where the manga was when I started reading the manga, translated from Japanese, of course. It didn't have. It had like the first couple volumes were releasing in English, but yeah, I was very quickly up to date. Nevertheless, I don't even why I get started on all of that. That's a really big tangent for me to just completely forget. Cause to confront. The whole point that I was bringing up is that I'm much more familiar with the manga, and so my character's name pronunciation is going to be a lot less like precise, because I'm used to interacting with these names as text, whereas I think a lot of fans are used to hearing the names, especially in a localized dub, which I was, even whenever I watched the anime, I watched it in Japanese, so I wasn't paying all that much attention to the precision of the language, if you know what I mean. I was reading the subtitles. So, if I get the names wrong, I do apologize. I want to say that upright and up front. Does it make me like less of a fan or something? I don't know. Maybe. Like I don't. You know what character I'm talking about. I kind of tend to be pretty passe and laissez-faire with the use of language. So long as you understand who I refer to, it's all fine. But you'll hear me get tripped up over Byakuya. Byakuya. God, I'm not. See, I'm already. Anyway, let's talk about the chapter, folks. Let's talk about the chapter. Chad looking pretty good in this chapter, honestly. I think the real purpose of the chapter, other than to progress this fight and establish a little bit of a different captain, and everything that happens literally within the chapter, the big thing that this chapter does is it sets up something that Chad brings up later about the difference between a third seat and a captain, that even two ranks can have this sea of difference in capability, and we're shown that with Chad so that we understand further the stakes of the fight with Ichigo, and of course, then we have to wonder, well, if Uryu and Orihime run into a captain, as Shunsui clearly kind of points out will be happening, that like there is this much bigger challenge to happen, and this is kind of something that's already been set up. It's a smart way to set up the stakes, is to create this kind of hierarchy within a group, and so that way you can fight your way up the chain. But then the cool thing is that there's these parallel positions, and Kubo does a lot with that kind of structure to make it work. I like it a lot. I think it works really well for a battle shonen, but also fits within the fits, I guess, diegetically within the world, if that makes sense. It fits within the world as a functional piece of the world building, rather than something that feels like a narrative element that only exists to serve the purpose of a shonen manga where you fight increasingly difficult enemies. So, Like it's rough for me to watch some shows because like it'll be like, and we're the big bad group, and I'm the leader of the group, and these are all of my disposable minions that you will almost certainly defeat on your journey to defeat me. There goes much of the tension unless this is well handled. Like it's rough. Anytime like and I gotta say, I gotta bring up my favorite punching bag. Maybe it's just because it's in recent memory, and maybe it's because it lifts a lot of like its worst lessons from Bleach, and maybe it's because it sees pretty universal praise among newer fans, and so I'm always quick to take it down a peg because I am a countercultural force. I mean, I like Bleach. Come on, um, that's that contrarian in me, right? Anyway, Demon Slayer. Demon Slayer quickly sets up its primary antagonist, and then it kind of after that point, like every time another little like underling shows up to play with our main characters, I never really like if they're like, "Oh no, it's a demon! He's gonna kill all of us!" Ah! I was like, "You're gonna beat him, dude. Like, you got a big bad to eventually beat. I already know the big bad. Like it's no problem." Whereas Bleach has really done a good job of setting up several parallel foes and establishing that the enemy isn't really any one individual, but this kind of concept that there's this societal force that is crushing down upon the individual. And unless Ichigo changes fundamentally the rules of how things work, unless he's able to change society, then he will always be in conflict with like the mandate of the heavens. It's legit, it's raw, like so like as much as like there's like characters like Grand Fisher who's still out there. We have this dichotomy of captains that will all stand across and against from him. We have I say dichotomy. What am I saying? There's several captains. This dichotomy is maybe an okay word to use there. I don't know. Anyway, um, diaspora might be more accurate. We have several different captains that are going to stand up against Ichigo and stand in his way for different reasons, and I like that, but all ultimately are gathered under this banner of society. They're all willing to uphold these strictures, corrupt as they may be, twisted as they may be, and we'll see how that affects things too. And I love that. I think it makes for a much more interesting narrative because now the tension is taken off from, okay, well, he's got to beat the eventual big bad guy, so whatever, this doesn't matter. And maybe that's a weakness of later arcs, right? We can talk about that while we get there. Is that maybe you start to process that and be like, okay, I understand that there's this hierarchical structure kind of going on, so this fight can't be lost, and so then you have to kind of find other ways to build tension into your conflicts. And I think sometimes Kubo does that very well, and other times Bleach kind of flounders at that, and we'll talk about that as we come there. But I think Soul Society arc does a pretty good job of holding that tension and making these conflicts feel like, oh well, which way will they go? I really love how out of their depth both Chad and Ichigo are presented in these battles, and in different ways. It's kind of interesting the way that these battles are set up against each other, where Ichigo lands a hit on Zaraki, but it doesn't even cut his skin. It hurts Ichigo. And here Chad is taking these strikes to try to hit her boy Shunsui, and Shunsui just bats one away and doesn't get hit by the rest. So it's like you can't even hit him at all, But yeah, I love that he comes and he has this very dramatic entrance. There's the flower petals in the air, and like more and more of them start to fall. And I love that the sound effects kind of couple with them, and it's kind of light here, and then it gets doubled over here, and they're all like overtaking the panel by the last panel here. Um, and yeah, of course, it's revealed that Nano is up there sprinkling petals down for his grand entrance. So this is probably something that Shunsui directed her to do, and she kind of doesn't look like she realizes this is absolutely childish nonsense. And yeah, Shunsui with his Nano-chan, he's kind of just, oh my Nano, lovely, precious Nano. He's kind of being silly and flirtatious to try to get her attention. And I mean, he has it. She just dumps the rest of the petals on him. I really love this. Like, this is one of my favorite gag like bits from the series, and I love the way this is handled in the manga here, where like she's like letting down the petals, and then she's literally above him in this, and she drops all of the petals onto him right here. Like she even like shakes a few out. It's good stuff. I just love Shunsui buried under flower petals. And I don't know, like I could talk about like Shunsui certainly is a character who's very showy, very opulent. And I like that he has a performative nature to him. And so you see that not only in the way he's dressed, but also these sort of antics. And in a certain way, it's very disarming. Like, Shunsui is certainly proven in this chapter to be a very powerful character, but he puts on this disarming kind of like face that he would rather face the world with like drink, hey, let's be friends. This conflict's already kind of resolved itself, Chad. So let's just have some drinks. Let's just chill. Do we really gotta fight? Because I'm gonna fucking murder you if we do. Let's be real. Like so, like he certainly he embodies that sort of playfulness, that fun and games he mentioned. Shunsui certainly is again held in juxtaposition to a character like Kenpachi, who fully embraces this more savage side of things, where Shunsui doesn't really seem like he wants to stop the Ryoka, or that he's really passionate about this, or that he really wants to be in this fight at all. But it's his duty, right? It's his job. It's work, and so he's going to have some fun with it if he can. Whereas on the flip side, you have Kenpachi, who, as his job, he's like, okay, well, you need to go stop the Ryoka, and he doesn't even really care about doing that job. He's just like, oh, one of them's strong. Yeah, I'll go fight him. I'll stop. I'm sure. So it's interesting that Shunsui kind of falls a little bit more on that side of duty, on that side of like, while he doesn't really feel passionate about enacting society's will, he's still willing to, and he's still willing to be do that, and he puts on an approachable face. He's kind of like that manager that you might have at a job who's like really friendly and easy to get along with, but he'll still fire your ass, And you're like, what, dude? I thought we were dogs, dog. And he's like, no, dude, this is work. So I don't know that it's particularly duplicitous. I think Shunsui does want to engage with those more lighthearted elements. And maybe that even reflects kind of the person that he wants to be. He just wants to hang out and drink and chill, but he's got to work his 9 to 5, and he's going to take that seriously, and that overrides whatever his personal desires are, even if it comes down to like executing a person out of turn. Yeah, it's fucked up, right? So like it reflects the way I think Shunsui is maybe a instantly relatable character, a character that we can really kind of immediately feel connection to, and I think Shunsui ends up being a fairly popular character for that reason, because he's like a lot of people, where unlike Ichigo, a lot of people aren't willing to really fight against society. They'll have some, they'll have some personal resistance in these small ways, but at the end of the day, most of us are complicit in society, even when it makes us do things we don't want to do. Like, I will tell you for a fact, even though I enjoy the job that I have right now, even though I enjoy my full-time position, I don't want to wake up every morning at 6 a.m. to go to work and work for 8 hours. I don't think most human beings enjoy essentially wage slaving like that, Just like, I don't want to, like, if it was up to me, I wouldn't want to pay for certain things, like certain taxes or certain bills. Like, I can understand different things, but, like, I don't think it should be mandated that I have, like, insurance, for instance. Like, it shouldn't be illegal not to have insurance, because, I mean, it just shouldn't. Like, yeah, if you get in an accident, then definitely you're liable for it, and if you don't have insurance, then you should have to cover that liability, don't get me wrong, but it shouldn't be legal not to be covered by insurance. Things like that, and that's an American society, of course, but any society will have some sort of stricture, some sort of law system and code of laws and expectations for you, both in a workplace as well as a member of society that is not a sociopath, right? A sociopath is somebody who is So a psychopath is somebody who doesn't follow the laws of a mentally functional sort of mind, right? A sociopath is somebody who doesn't adhere to the mores of society. So a sociopath might not see anything wrong with stealing from like a store because they're like, like whatever justification they have, they don't see anything wrong with it. A sociopath might kill somebody because they haven't really adhered to the social sort of aspects of like, well, this is wrong within that society, but they might kill somebody with whatever their internal justification is. They still have an internal justification. They're not just killing people for fun, um, but they're kind of a miss in society, and some in society, of course, doesn't like sociopaths. We lock them up because they don't work within our structures, right? So, like, as much as entering society is like an agreement that you make every day, that you make constantly, it's constantly a contract you're upholding. It's also something that like you kind of can't escape. And I think Shunsui in a lot of ways reflects the average person, where like most people probably just want to have a good time, relax, not really be bothered by all this stuff. They'll do their job if they're asked to. They'll do the work that they're, tasked with doing, but they would rather just kind of hang out and drink and chill. And I think that's certainly something that's relatable, even if it aligns him as an antagonist in this particular position. I mean, think about it this way: like, if you were working at your job and someone at your job gets fired, you don't know why. You just know that they've been fired, and some people that don't even work there, that are just friends with this person, show up to this person's been fired. They're going to be terminated. The work's not all done yet, but they can't keep coming to work, etc. Right? And so some of their friends show up at the workplace to start a fucking ruckus, right? Like, you wouldn't want to get involved with that. You wouldn't want to stop. Like, you wouldn't want to deal with any of that probably. But like, let's say your security, you can't let those people through, even if their cause is maybe reasonable. Even if that what if you find out the reason the person's being fired is like literally not even a justified reason? What if it's somebody at your company that pulled some shit to try to get them fired? It's not even their fault at all. So like, it's something like that. Like, right, Rukia's execution is this sort of thing that a lot of these characters don't have a personal connection to. Like, we don't see any sort of personal connection between Shunsui and Rukia. And so he's not really going to fight against her execution because it's just something that the society he's in ordains, and he's just a part of it. And he's like, well, yeah, executions happen. He doesn't even understand like the full context of it. And even if he did, then you have to wonder, well, what would he do? So that's a little bit of a defense of his character, a little bit of why I think a lot of people like his character. I know I've spent a little bit more than a little bit of time talking about it. So let's go on. Let's actually talk about the rest of what's happening in this chapter. But I think Shunsui is a really neat character, nevertheless. I think this chapter is fantastic for really quickly portraying and defining him in a way, and also, like I said, drawing these parallels between the fight with Ichigo and Saraki in the fight with Chad and Shunsui, and really establishing the power that captains are at. And I love these backs and forths. Again, I'll bring it up again in the terms of artwork and everything, but it's that left-right momentum. So we have Chad on the right, and he wants to move left. He wants to move the way that we're reading. He wants to move forward with the manga. Shunsui is here as a roadblock for him, right? Shunsui is right aligned. Shunsui is left or right aligned. He's blocking our character who wants to move left forward in the manga. And so here's Chad facing forward, Shunsui facing against him. That's brought down to our panels. And then Shunsui in the middle, he offers this middle ground. He offers this space to, just, hey, let's hang out in this space. Let's have a drink like friends. He proposes like, yeah, why don't we just hang out and drink and, enjoy our time together. And this is just another way that Shunsui is trying to block Chad's progression. It's a less violent block, certainly, just like we were talking about. Like, it's certainly much more up forward and up front and all of that, and it puts on like a kind of a peaceful face, just like Shunsui would. Now, getting Chad drunk Obviously, he could take advantage of that situation. He could maybe defeat him whenever Chad's not got his wits about him. He could have him detained. He could get information from him. So there might be something darker there, but we don't have any implication of that. What I do like is that he kind of slips up. He's like, well, yeah, this Pleasant one was finished. The others are on the move, the other captains. And at this point, Shunsui realizing, like, man, I must have said too much. That, you've kind of tipped your hand that the captains are on the move. And I like that gives Chad, like, this, like, okay, well, if everybody's else is at risk, I gotta work even harder. And I love that. I love, also Shunsui's just drawn so well. I love the little pinwheels in his braid. I enjoy the kind of how hairy this dude is. Man, this dude's hairy. But like the backs of his hands and everything, he comes across as an older character, and I appreciate that, because I will say that a lot of manga, because it's aimed at a younger audience, tends to try to loathe drawing these older characters. It tends to give its characters a lot more youth, and then the ones that are older are like stylistically older. I mean, like I can point you to Naruto, especially, where like everyone in Naruto feels like they're a teenager, unless they're like someone like any of the like adult characters don't really like look as adult unless they have like ridiculous proportions, like like female characters got their titties out. It's a common thing in Naruto. If you're an adult and a woman, your titties are out. Uh, like but like are like they're like like with Kakashi, who's supposed to be an older character, he's not really portrayed as older. Just the character's written more mature. But yeah, like characters like Jiraiya are the third. They're like made like comically old looking, like Ginryu Sai is in Bleach. Like they're all wrinkled up. They have the white hair. Like all of that, right? Whereas I like, and this is one of the strengths that Bleach has always had, is that it's portrayed characters that are more realistically kind of mature. And so Ichigo and his friends feel more reflective of an actual teenager friend group, and actual teens. But then like characters like Shunsui, like this guy that like seems like he's maybe in his 40s, 50s, like I could certainly see a guy that looks like this, like that's not like portrayed comically old. It's stylistic for sure, but it's not like overdone, I feel. And I don't know, I like that. I think that there's like a certain realism to it. I feel like the shading on Shunsui's thumb down here is a bit like with the crevice of it like that. I don't know, maybe I need to look at reference. Maybe that kind of works. But his thumb looks a little wacky to me. Same thing with whatever's going on with this digit here, where it dips and then comes back up. Oh no, that's his chin. Okay, that makes a lot more sense then. That's his chin. I was reading that visual wrong. I was like, is this the chin part of his finger? No, that's his chin. Okay, that makes a little bit more sense. But yeah, his thumb, I don't know what's going on there. But overall, I really do like Shunsui's whole shtick. More than maybe I did. Whenever I originally read this, and there's the alarms, it's how I don't edit this or script it or read it in a studio or whatever the hell. I'm doing this from my apartment every night. But yeah, the alarm's out. That's letting me know I need to continue. But yeah, one of the things that I'm realizing on this reread is that like I actually Shunsui's character is one that is a little bit more striking than he was when I originally came across him. Because he was a character that I didn't really care for all too much, and after reading through Bleach the first time, I was like, he's alright. Whereas, like, no, I don't know. I like his vibes a lot in this first kind of thing. Of course, I love Chad. I've always been a huge fan of Chad. I don't understand how you could not be a fan of Chad. Chad's great. But yeah, I love Chad, launches his fist missile here to Shunsui, who just stays drinking. And this panel especially, where he just bats it away, backhands it without even dropping his liquor. He's still drinking his drink, and Chad immediately, the shock on Chad's face as he realizes what's going down. I also really like that Chad never here gets as unnerved as Ichigo is with Kenpachi. And I think part of that is that Ichigo can really read Kenpachi's killing intent, like, the whole sort of the throat kind of feeling. Whereas Shunswee's not giving that off because Shunsui doesn't want to kill Chad. And I like that dichotomy. Like, Shunswee's like, yes, I'll kill you if I have to, because it's my job. But, like, he's not here to murder Chad. He's just here to stop him from progressing. But yes. And you could have just entered the chapter here, this, like, things are getting complicated, But that's just the title page, and here we get this wonderful art of Shunsui taking himself a little nap. Yeah, it's good. Again, we're very reflective of the character. It's very evocative of the sort of energy that he has, which is big sleepy man energy. And here, yeah, he's just blasting away these, and he's dodging them. And he's like, "Oh, yep, you missed again." It's like, yeah, well, you keep dodging, man. And so here we see, like, not only are the captains powerful, but of course they're very quick too. And yeah, I love this internalization for Chad. I love just like Chad's drawn real sharply in this chapter. And I will say one of the things I was noticing previous chapter in this one is, again, a lot more confidence in Kubo's line and ink work. Just like look at Chad's hair and how like Chad and Shunsui's hair are both handled, the way the light falls on them, all of that. But like even just like the character designs themselves, the Shihakusho robes on the captains. I will say something that I was thinking about in this design. Some of the white captain's robes are fully sleeved, like they go down to the wrist, and other ones cut off right at the shoulder. And I'm not quite sure if there is a universality between those. I want to say the ones that cut off at the shoulder are for captains that are newer, whereas the full sleeve robes are for the older captains, but I could be wrong. Yeah, I don't know. Like I don't know if it's like if there is any sort of significance to the having the full sleeves on your robe. Certainly here with Shunsui, we see he has the full sleeves on his robe, and he even has the secondary robe. But yeah, it's something to kind of keep an eye for, and something that's kind of subtle. And I'm sure it has some sort of significance that's not spelled out, and I just have to kind of parse out as I go through. But yeah, that was one of the things that I was looking for. I also went back and checked and made sure, and actually Kenpachi and Gin both had their swords on them whenever they interacted with Byakuya. I went back and actually checked because I didn't know if they had their Zanpakuto on them, because technically they weren't like allowed to draw them within the Seirei, but I think they could still carry them. I'm not positive. Oh boy, that's maybe something else I need to go and see. But I think the idea is they're supposed to carry their swords at all times, and they have permission to use them and release them within the Seirei now, whereas normally they don't. Anyway, I like that, Shunsui brings up this point, like, yo, you can't hit me. You're just going to get tireder. This is always going to be the same. Like, yeah, you're really powerful, dude. Like, but I am an opponent you cannot defeat. And, like, why don't you just stop? And I like Chad's, like, response of, like, look, man, I can't, And there's this almost, like, sadness on Shunsui's part of, like, like the don't do it, like, as he ultimately kind of decides to stop Chad for this rationale that he gives here, right? That there are essentially two kinds of techniques. There's ones that you can do plenty of times, but they cannot. Yeah, ones that can't be performed all at once. Your limit has been reached, or can't be performed at all once your limit has been reached. So like once you've reached your limit, you're done using those moves. Like you do them once, you're tuckered out. And the other ones, you can do past like what your limit is, but they use up your life force. They will drain you to the point where you will die. And so we get this kind of interesting moment where Chad, a lot of his power is actually self-sacrificial here, where he's way beyond his limit, and he's using these strikes, that are draining him, that are literally using his life force to fuel these attacks that aren't even landing on Shunsui, who's able to flick Chad away and leave him in a smoldering crater with just a flick of his fingers. So yeah, it's pretty devastating that like Shunsui establishes like, look, man, you need to stop making these attacks. You need to start having this because you're literally like killing yourself. Like I wouldn't even have to raise a finger for you to die. And of course, Chad gets back up, and I love that, like, we get this zoom out and we see all these huge scars in the ground that Chad has left with his blasts. And I do love that. Great kind of visual. And I like the back and forth here that he's like, well, my purpose here is to save Rukia. And again, we have Chad, facing right, blocked by the left. And he's like, okay, well, look, you can't have that much of a close connection. And then finally we get Chad, on the other side here, maybe gaining a little bit of momentum in this fight, as he establishes the real reason that he's here is because Ichigo, right? Because Chad's willing to kind of hitch his wagon to Ichigo's, because Chad has this intense connection to Ichigo. And I love that for Chad, because, like, so much of Ichigo is like, okay, well, I've got these really close personal connections, and I'm willing to fight and die for other people. And Chad, like, even if he doesn't have a close connection to Rukia, because he has a close connection to Ichigo, and because Ichigo is so passionately striving for this, Chad's like, well, yeah, Ichigo wants to do it. That's all the reason I need to get behind him. And it just shows like how the individual can affect others, like how the power of these relationships can really fuel these characters and motivate them. Essentially, Chad is in Ichigo's corner. Chad's like, well, Ichigo needs his allies here. He needs people to support him. Like, Ichigo's essentially going on a suicide mission. And so having Chad at his back gives Ichigo that extra confidence. Even if Chad's not entirely passionate about saving Rukia herself, his passions lie in assisting Ichigo with the things that Ichigo cares about. And I mean, that's like a real true dear friend. And I love the way that like the light hits Chad's face. So we've been seeing Chad's eyes constantly, but the fact that Chad's eyes get obscured in this last panel, I think makes it that much more striking. Chad just taking up the bottom of this page, looking buff and strong and like just powerful, as he lays out like, that's all the reason I need. And I love that we get this little hint of a flashback to Ichigo getting beaten up and fighting the people, because like Chad's introduction to Ichigo is, yo, dude, those guys almost killed you with rocks. And Ichigo is like, yeah, but they would fight me over the way that I look that I don't even have control over. Like, fuck them. I gotta fight. Like that. Like the societal pressures that are pushed on Ichigo push him in this position of conflict. And rather than just dyeing his hair or giving up some facet of himself, Ichigo is willing to fight to protect the things that he feels are important to his identity. And I think that really motivates Chad, because Chad sees Ichigo take up that fight, and Chad knows himself as being very different from other people. And that's inspiring to him, that Ichigo represents like standing up for oneself and, being willing to actually fight for what you believe in. And maybe Chad didn't fight for what he believed in before he met Ichigo. Nevertheless, this moment that he had, this moment that we got a flashback towards to their first meeting, is significant for Chad. And I love that that comes up here, as Chad remembers that, and he's like, he was having the dream about that, and now that he's kind of flashing back, he's like, well, yeah, that's reason enough, right? And said, isn't that exactly? Let me actually go back a few pages and let me see. And by a few pages, I mean like a few chapters, because I got to see if that's actually. I think that's what Ichigo said in the flashback, but I could be wrong. This is the problem with having trash for memory. Yeah. Chad's like, hey, thanks for helping. Or Ichigo's like, thanks for helping me out. Yeah. Yeah, I thought that he had said like that's reason enough, but essentially it has the same sort of sentiment, right? That like, Ichigo, like they'll fight Ichigo for like petty reasons, and Ichigo is willing to fight back because he's going to stand back against them, and he's going to fight alongside Chad because that's reason enough for him to essentially ally with Chad, right? That they are both kind of outsiders. Anyway, maybe let's get back to this. Here we go. Anyway, I love that. Like that gives like Shunsui a little smile. Like he's like, oh well, it'd be disrespectful of me to try to talk you out of that. Like he understands this bond Chad has, which is nice. He decides to take it a little bit seriously to show Chad this level of respect. The problem is showing someone respect and taking them seriously in Soul Society, of course, means killing them. So here, finally, Shunsui draws his Zanpakuto, and he has two shorter swords. They kind of have a petal-like, almost like a scenery design. This almost looks like mountains. But yeah, pretty straightforward kind of weapons. Again, both two shorter, kind of wakizashi almost size swords that he draws. And those are his weapons. I like the little tiny like star designs at the bottom of his sash here. That he has a colored sash, unlike a lot of other people who might have just a straight white sash. I like that it's colored and has little tassels. It has the stars at the bottom. Another kind of detail that you usually don't get to see, as this character is often depicted from the waist up, as a lot of them are. But it is a nice detail nevertheless. But yeah, of course, I love that Chad charges forward, and then we cut back to a flashback of, this moment with Ichigo as he calls out and he thinks about Ichigo. And here we will assumably, get a continued flashback at some point. It's not like Chad's calling to Ichigo in the past or something. Again, I love the power lines, very like roots Bleach into this urban kind of setting that it has. Whenever it's not in Soul Society, power lines are pretty iconic for Bleach. So yeah, it's good stuff. I do enjoy it. I think it is great. And that is it for kind of the analysis of this chapter. Talking a lot about the art. I do appreciate it. I think like it's kind of striking how different this fight is from the fight that Ichigo's having, but also the parallels and the similarities. And I think that we're supposed to kind of notice those things. I like how unwavering Chad is, even though he is very much outclassed, versus Ichigo, who's very much put into a state of shock by Kenpachi. I think it's good stuff. It's really neat, and it does a lot to kind of establish these differences in their characters. Where Chad has absolute faith and resolve in Ichigo. He's doesn't question his convictions. It's just the problem is that Chad is always kind of honestly fighting above his weight class. Like Chad seems like a really powerful guy, but Shunsui is the first to point out, like, yo, you're swinging these big hits, but it's after a couple of them, it's way beyond what you can manage. So like Chad is like pushing himself ragged here, and he, even if no one else will acknowledge it or admit it, Chad himself, because he's just going to push himself through it, because that's what it means to hold to these convictions, right? Shunsui is going to call him out on it. It's interesting to finally get that Chad kind of has a shortcoming of his own, because all these characters sort of do. All of our protagonists have a way that they handle trauma, a way that they handle conflict. And Ichigo right now, like, he's up against Kenpachi, and so he's finally, when Ichigo is up against this opponent that he can't damage or can't hurt at all, that he can't even affect, Ichigo starts to despair. And we see this difference. Like, Chad doesn't despair. Chad will literally grind himself into dust to try to go against this unmovable opponent. Ichigo falls quickly into despair, and that's going to be a significant kind of thing for Ichigo. Like, will he be able to gather his resolve and overcome that despair, or will that despair shake his resolve and make it to where he can never really succeed against these truly stronger opponents? And I like that like there is that difference between those characters. So let's talk about spoilers, why don't we? I'm actually interjecting this after I finished the video because I forgot that I wanted to talk about this, so I'm just going to cut this and put it at the beginning of the spoiler section. But really kind of interesting thing here is that Takiharu mentions that Uryu is poor, which doesn't make any sense he is the scion of an entire hospital. Everything that we've seen, like, represents his family having a lot of money. So does he just put on a story of being poor? Does he just present as poor? Does he only allowed so much of an allowance? You would think that they would perceive Uryu as having a lot of money, but yeah, the fact that both Oryu and Orihime don't have phones for different reasons is kind of humorous, I suppose. But yeah, Uryu being poor is a weird kind of thing, and it does make me wonder. Like, I get like this is maybe just for a gag, but I wonder like at what points Kubo had it figured out that Uryu and Ryukin especially were characters and they worked at this larger hospital that was connected. Because certainly we have that moment where Ishin is on the phone, right? And he's talking about having the transfer from the other hospital. So, like, clearly there's like that's present early on. And I don't remember if Uryu mentions any of the stuff from his own hospital or from, any of that during the substitute arc. I don't remember if that comes up in any context. Um, but yeah, I don't know if that's something that Kubo actually had figured out right now. I wonder if Kubo actually had the idea that Uryu was just like a regular dude from a poor family at this point. Um, I don't know, poor little Quincy boy. Yeah, it's certainly a line that struck me whenever I was doing the reading. I was like, "Uryu's poor? Like, who's under that impression?" Apparently, Takihara is. The way that I am forced to read this, like with the entirety of the series in mind, is I kind of read this as Uryu doesn't flaunt his basically his status or his money, because he must have money, or at least his family does. Maybe he doesn't himself, but yeah, it's strange. It's a strange take for sure. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that one? Let me know. Let's get into how this connects to the rest of Bleach, and I do want to say that this is like a lot of people. A lot of people give Chad flack. A lot of people will be critical of Chad because he doesn't catch any more wins throughout the rest of the manga, basically. But I will argue that that's the point of his character. Chad's character exists to be somebody who has to deal with conflicts larger than he is, who has to go up against opponents that he cannot defeat. And as he sees his friend that he's getting into all this for grow stronger from him, Chad has to reconcile, how do I support this person close to me? How do I continue to kind of like do I just give up because I can't possibly fight the fight that he's fighting? I'm not on that level. And like Chad, Chad tries to train to kind of keep up with Ichigo. He's constantly trying to kind of evolve his power to stay one step ahead, and he never quite can. And ultimately, I think the conclusion Chad comes to is that just like at the beginning here, just like he says, because Ichigo cares about it, Chad will throw himself behind Ichigo, even if it means that Chad is likely to die, right? And I think that's powerful stuff. Like that. Ultimately, at the end of the day, Chad values his connection with Ichigo, and Chad values that camaraderie so much that, and like you can say, like maybe it's not growth because Chad kind of starts there, but it is because Chad has to kind of handle the fact that he's getting weaker, and that's something that comes up later. Um, Chad's character is all about like having this kind of conflict of like, well, if you do know the things you care about and you're willing to fight for the things you care about, what do you do whenever you know that that fight won't end well for you personally? Is it still worthwhile to have that cause for confrontation? Chapter title? Like, is it still important to have that fight even if you're going to lose it? Like, is Chad supporting Ichigo worth it enough? And Chad comes to the conclusion, yes, it is. Like, yeah, I'm going to support my friends even if it means that like I can't offer much other than the support of me being there for them. Um, and yeah, I do wish Chad maybe got more like actual physical victories in fights, certainly. But I do think it's important to kind of have that growth for Chad. Um, Yeah, there's a lot of things to Chad that I feel like get maligned within the community because this is a shonen series, and characters who don't win fights often kind of get the rub. It sucks, but it's just the case that it is. And I think Chad is a more interesting character than to kind of just boil him down to like a Worf or something. I say Worf, referencing, of course, Star Trek. Worf is the character that everybody establishes as like, oh, he's the really powerful fight guy, and then he constantly is losing so that the other protagonists can beat whoever beat him, so it can look like they're really strong. But then it's like, well, how can we accept that Worf is this powerful fight guy if he never actually gets a victory on screen? I don't think that's the case with Chad. A lot of people use the "I can't imagine Chad losing" line to try to kind of present him in that case, and I don't think that's the case. Yes, the Soul Society arc, everything up to this point, is meant to portray Chad as the strongest in the group. But whenever we understand that there is this big gulf of power, and that Chad is just a human, which gets highlighted in this chapter, I mean, he's a Fullbringer, but the fact that Chad doesn't have the power to see his dreams come true, then it's like, okay, well, Chad, where do you throw your lot? What do you do? Um, and so yeah, as Chad as a character, I think is one that I like a lot more reading that way. Whenever I read him as a character who's more there for maybe moral support, are more kind of struggling with like, well, how do I support Ichigo whenever historically I have been the big strong guy who could always help Ichigo in a fight, but now I can't. And that becomes like a conflict that Chad sort of has to struggle with. Albeit not on screen as much as I would like, it's still a conflict he has to deal with, nevertheless. I do love Shunsui. Of course, I didn't expect that I would. Shunsui and Nano just being absolutely killing it in this chapter. Um, I talk a bit about Shunsui putting on that face and about his duty, and that he has ultimately this duty to Soul Society that outweighs the sort of projections that he puts on. And I love that that continues to be the case whenever he becomes the Captain Commander, right? Um, I do enjoy that, like, ultimately it's duty that wins out, and then he becomes a much more severe character and starts to take things more seriously because he can't shirk that duty anymore. Um, he loses his eye and gets new perspective. Eh? But anyway, um, the other big thing with Shunsui that I wanted to point out that I think is worthwhile and kind of foreshadowing kind of here from this chapter is that he has this sort of like, let's mask and try to deal with this conflict in a playful way and a disarming way, and that really reflects his abilities, right? That he has, that showmanship to him, that sort of performative aspect to him, but beneath that is a kind of sinister duty, like I'm gonna kill you. Just like, his Shikai, of course, has the child's games, but there's a more sinister element to them, just like a lot of nursery rhymes. So like, London Bridge is falling down, are like, ashes, ashes, we all fall down. Like, that's pretty fucked up. Like a lot of nursery rhymes are really sketch, but like all that sort of stuff, that sort of like children, like playing a sort of game to, like, I don't know, that's representative of something darker, or that's evocative of something darker, but they're able to engage with it because it's a game, right? And that's constantly a thing that children are engaged in, that we engage with children. I mean, like the whole birds and the bees speech, right? The reason why it's birds and bees is because you don't just sit down with your kid and you're like, people fuck. This is how it goes. You couch it in this kind of performative and maybe more approachable manner. And I think that's the whole deal with Shunsui, is that he has this lethality to him, he has this seriousness to him, but he couches it in games. He distances himself perhaps in performance, right? And the dramatics of that. That said, there is this kind of darkness, or this like I said, severity at the heart of his character. But that's in conflict with the kind of lightheartedness that he would prefer to have. And ultimately, I think that's the deal. Is like Shunsui he wants things to be good and chill and fun, but at the end of the day, he will straight murder you if he has to. And I think that's reflective of the sort of soul society that he wants to build, and even maybe even reflective of the soul society as it exists. Whereas the soul society would certainly like you to believe that it is a wonderful, nice place where you don't have to worry about hunger or anything like that. Um, but Soul Society is in fact this very serious kind of like high stakes, severe sort of place, and so I like that Shunsui reflects that. And ultimately, whenever he becomes the Captain Commander, it makes a lot of sense for me because not just because he's one of the more mature characters and he was kind of groomed for it and all of that, but because he's reflective of the Soul Society itself. That ultimately duty wins out, and I like that in this arc, he ends up siding with Rukia, that he ends up doing all that, but that's only once he discovers the truth of things, once he understands the conspiracy, understands that this is something coming from Aizen. Right now, he supports Rukia's execution, ostensibly. So, it's interesting that he represents the kind of way Soul Society is headed, and he ends up becoming the captain of that new Soul Society. Yeah. Shunsui suddenly appearing behind Chad and like out of his shadow almost even. Who knows? Anyway, not suggesting he's actually using his Shikai. He hasn't revealed it yet there. But yeah, that's it for this chapter really. This is I know a longer one. This is getting to be about an hour. So I think I will close it here. All in all, very solid chapter. Does a lot of character work for all of these characters. Really builds a lot of things that we'll see going forward for Shunsui and Chad. Wish maybe there was a little bit more Nano, but we get Nanao. I keep saying Nano. Nanao. But we'll get it when we get it. We understand as much of her as we kind of need to for now. Nanao for now. Anyway. Whew. Thanks so much for watching this one, folks. If you actually made it to the end of this one, please do give the video a like. I do appreciate knowing, like, hey, you made it all the way through. But also, feel free to subscribe to this content if you haven't already. I put out one of these every day if I can, and if I miss a day, I try to put out 2 the next day, if possible. I'll post on Twitter whenever I have any sort of those issues. I try to post on Twitter when I upload new episodes, but I don't always do that. So if you do want to know, like, hey, isn't there supposed to be one a day? Always do check the Twitter. But if you do want to support me in other ways, you can always share this with people that you think might be interested. Anyone you know that likes Bleach or wants to kind of revisit it. But otherwise, the other big thing that you can do is you can always support me and the channel on Patreon. And right now, the names of all the current Patreon supporters are on screen for you to read and enjoy, and your name could be there for the small donation of only $1 a month, or as much as you feel comfortable giving. I really don't have any tiers. It's donate what you like, and you can stop anytime. Just so long as you're donating, you will be on this list at the end of every episode. And I want to give a huge thanks to the folks that are donating. Thank you so much, as always. That's it for this one, folks. I am Carker Gold, reminding you that spirits are forever with you. Stay gold.